Okay, hello everyone, and thank you very much for joining me this evening. My name is Richard from the Seneca team, and today we're going to look at Seneca through the lens of remote learning, so you can really understand and drill down into what it is that you can use Seneca for, what the theory says about remote learning, and just have a bit of a refresh on that, given that it's so important in the work that we're doing at the moment. Now, the way the session is going to work is you'll find on this Zoom call, unlike a regular Zoom call, if you were talking to somebody in a meeting or something like that, you won't be able to unmute yourself in this session. So the way questioning and things like that will work for you is that if you have any questions, what I encourage you to do is to pop them in the chat on Zoom. So for anyone who's not familiar with how Zoom works, if you just click on your screen, you'll see at the bottom of the page there is an option to add to chat. So I can just type in there, so I can write hi everyone, and you can join in the conversation there. So ask any questions you have there, and we'll be tight on time. So and given the number of people in the call, I imagine there'll be lots of questions, and I'm going to apologise in advance. I'm not going to be able to answer all of those questions. So yeah, please do just pop questions in there. I'll try and get through as many as I can before the end of the session. It would be great to know where you're all joining me from as well, so build a picture of where you are in the country or across the world. So it'd be great to hear from you. So it's always already see some people popping in their locations, which is great. So without further ado, let's get going, get started with the session. So it's going to be broken into sort of, it's going to be basically framed around this EEF literature review, which I'm going to look at in a bit more detail. And basically the literature review was originally written back in April, and it was looking basically at supporting schools during the first lockdown, but a lot of the same principles still apply. And I think it's important and good to have a refresh, or if it's not something you've seen before, it's a really good, useful document. And I'll make sure I'll send it around afterwards as well, so you can have a read of it in the flesh as well. Now, for each of the recommendations that are on the in the review, I'm going to sort of talk a bit about how Seneca might be able to support you with that through that process, and also the different resources we have available. So as I mentioned, this EEF review was published in April of last year, and it was direct response commissioned by the government with relation to obviously the first lockdown that happened, which seems like a distant memory, but we seem to be back in the same position here again with schools closed. So we're going to look at basically 5 recommendations that are made as part of this report that are really important to refer back to when you're implementing strategies at supporting pupils with remote learning, and also alongside that supporting parents as well to sort of play their part in remote learning. Now, in terms of the methodology of the review, the way it was conducted by the EEF was it looked at existing research across 60 different reviews and meta-analyses, and looked for the evidence behind different approaches that schools could use. Now, the first recommendation that's made off the back of this session is that, off the back of this review, sorry, is that, or the first thing to highlight really is that teaching quality trumps the method of delivery, which is actually really reassuring as a starting point for this session, because we are, obviously not in schools at the moment. It's not an ideal situation, but there is still an opportunity to help children learn, and quality teaching is still quality teaching, whether you're in the classroom, whether you're delivering it on Zoom, whether you're delivering a video lesson. All these strategies that you'd use in the classroom still apply and still support learning. So the takeaway is basically pupils can still learn through remote teaching, and it suggests that you make sure as you go through this, just like you would as a class teacher, you're reviewing your practice, you're reflecting on what is working well and what isn't working well, and you're making sure that you're embedding the strategies that you would put into what you'd be called an effective lesson, making sure that is still a part of your lesson. Just because you're teaching it remotely, there's no difference there. So that includes things like making sure your explanations are really clear, making sure they're building on prior knowledge, making sure you're building in scaffolding for your students, making sure there's opportunities for feedback, all these things that you would normally do in class. it's no different now. We're remote. It's still exactly the same process, and making sure you're still doing these things that we know are high quality teaching and learning is really important. It's also more important how you deliver the content rather than when. So the actual way you deliver it is more important than necessarily if you're doing it on a Zoom or a video or anything like that. So if you look at what the evidence suggests is actually there's no clear difference between a live lesson that's delivered to students and a pre-recorded one that's delivered to students. So again, when you're thinking, you may have school policies that mandate one or the other, but just bear that in mind. In terms of the evidence, there is no difference. So one suggestion the review makes is that you might explain a new idea live or during a pre-recorded video, and that is great. But what matters most is that whether the explanation is clearly building on prior knowledge, whether you're assessing pupils' understanding to then influence your future planning. Those processes still support. So how can Seneca help with this? So you may be thinking this is sort of a lot to do with you, but there are obviously things that you can do alongside this that Seneca can help with. Now, the first one being to do with linking back to the point about high quality teaching is still high quality teaching. Now, the way our courses are structured and the way they're written is to specifically in a particular way to lower cognitive load. So we make sure every sentence stands alone, so students aren't having to remember threads through different sentences and refer back to different ideas, and that will help students to learn more effectively. And that has been proven, and that's still the case. And the courses that are written with using these techniques are still available and free, ready for you to use. There's also automatic differentiation. So a good part of any lesson will be that you are supporting your students for their specific needs, and Seneca does exactly that, but it does it all automatically for you. So what you'll see is as a student goes through a learning session, there will be differentiation automatically built in based on basically how the system learns if students are doing well, if students are asking questions correctly, or if they're not doing so well. The system will automatically adapt and change to make sure that the pupil is well catered for and that they're learning the content that's appropriate for them. Now, it also talked about feedback and making sure that was an essential part of a lesson. And thankfully, again, with Seneca, your students get instant feedback. So with any Seneca course, students will know whether they're right or wrong instantly. They get that instant feedback. You can see here there's one question right, one question wrong. And even when they're wrong, they get it corrected for them. So they're still learning even when they're not getting the answers correct. The other way we help with differentiation side of things, from your side of things as a teacher, is you get feedback on what your students do and don't understand. So you are able to see exactly the different topics that your students have done well in and not done so well in. And again, linking back to the EEF suggestion about making sure you're assessing pupils' understanding, all the data is automatically gathered for you and nicely presented in a way that you can see on the screen now. And even better than that, what you can then do is actually use this data to put in place intervention. So with this data, you can obviously then do something off the back of it, put some more teaching in place. You could also use what we call our smart reassign feature. And this is basically a way for students to, a way for you to basically create really tailored follow-up assignments. So based on the data we have on students here, so you'll see just behind this screen, you've got the different data. It will basically be able to go through each student and decide who hasn't completed the work, who has completed the work, but his best score is less than 50%, whose best score is less than 80%. And it'll basically create a custom tailored follow-up assignment for each of your students based on this criteria. So again, really quick way. It just takes like literally 10 seconds. It's like 4 clicks to create a really custom follow-up activity for your students. Now, the final thing I think linked to this sort of high quality teaching is sort of more important than the method of delivery, is that we also have standardized assessment courses. So, and these across all different subjects. So we cover 25 different subjects on Seneca. So these are available. That you can kind of think of them like the equivalent as end of topic tests, if you like. So these are standardized tests that you can set for your students, and they can, and you can get the data on them to assess their knowledge. Now, the second suggestion made as part of this review is to make sure that access to technology is available for all your students. Now, this is an obvious one, but basically the review says that almost all remote learning uses digital technology, and this is something we obviously know already. But one of the key suggestions that's maybe looking at sort of leadership level within schools and sort of higher up at sort of government level or MAT level is making sure that all your students have access to the technology they need. The biggest barriers for these are for disadvantaged students, as again you probably know. So making sure that everyone has access to that technology, and we know this because disadvantaged students are more likely to face the barriers with lack of internet, lack of access to devices and things like that. So on top of this, linked to sort of access to devices, access to internet and things like that, it's also important that the access to technology is actually in terms of, do people understand how to access the technology? Do they understand the processes? So as part of this, it's really important that teachers and pupils are provided with guidance on specific platforms that are being used across the school. And particularly if there's new forms of technology being implemented, that becomes particularly important. But this doesn't have to be in-person training. So one of the, like a webinar, me talking about how to use Seneca is obviously one way of doing it, but there's also lots of other ways you could do that. It could be informal training by doing your own research. It could be learning from a peer. There's lots of other ways you could do it as well. Now, I know schools and governments have been working a lot on supporting this, especially for disadvantaged people. But it's been a mixed rollout, shall we say, of making sure that everyone has access to the devices they need. Now, in terms of how we support, or we are able to support at Seneca, the first thing we do is we've made sure that that Seneca is available on all different devices, so not just on a computer. You can access it on a tablet and a mobile as well, and it's all optimized for those screens and those devices. And you can try it out now. If you just went on your phone, you'd be able to try it out, but that's all available there and ready for you to use. The other thing we try to do to help people get onboarded and get used to how platforms work when they're starting out is we make sure we break the processes down very simply. So this is just a screen grab from our teacher accounts. So when you first create an account, you can, so when you first create a class, you just get these 5 steps to go through. And at any point, you can see the Get Help button there. So if you have any issues, you can get through there and you can hear me talking through a video of how it works and showing you how it works. The other way we provide help is through our frequently asked questions. So on there are a whole ton of videos on there, I know because I recorded them all, of how to use Seneca and how to use it effectively. So if you just go on there and do a quick search on it, you'll find the resources you need. But if you are struggling at any point, there is our chat service, which you can talk to my colleague Olivia on, and again, she'll be able to support you on that. Now, the third recommendation talks about peer interactions, and they say that's really important because it not only boosts motivation, but also it's been shown to improve learning outcomes as well. And this is across multiple reviews. They highlight the importance of peer interaction during remote learning. And the reviews say it's an important way to motivate, as I say, and also improve outcomes. Now, the strategies explored in the review were peer marking and feedback, sharing models of good work, and also opportunities for live discussion of content. Now, it's really important to say, and I know this from speaking to teachers across the country over the last few months, that this is not something that's easy to do. And I want to acknowledge that because it is really, really difficult, but there are ways of doing it. And there's going to be different approaches to peer interaction that are likely to be better suited to different age groups. And knowing your class, you'll know what is most appropriate. So there's a few tools that I've had shared with me over the last few months that I think are worth mentioning, because there are some really valuable tools there. They're not necessarily Seneca tools, but there'll be something that'll be useful for everyone in there, I'm sure. So when this is specifically me, I was having some conversations with some teachers around live discussions and how they're ensuring live discussions can still happen remotely. Because if you imagine, I'm sure you've maybe done this by mistake, or having kids talk over each other on a Zoom call is tricky, or it's very slow because you're having to unmute and mute people. But you can use collaborative tools like Miro. So this is a really good tool for mind mapping. So everyone can collaborate on Miro at once and create these boards, and you can sort of create a template. So that's one way to do it. The other way could be looking at something like Google Google Docs. So if you're not familiar with Google Docs, it's basically a collaborative online version of Microsoft Word, Excel, and PowerPoint. So again, you can get that collaboration going through online platforms. Now, some ways that Seneca do provide support with this is, again, looking back at the data that we provide, and again, having like peer interactions and motivating students using each other. We obviously have all the data there that you can use with your pupils to motivate them to challenge each other online and to compare themselves against one another. And that's on a topic level, like you can see on screen now, but also on a sort of overall level. So you can see their overall learning times and their overall number of sessions they've completed, number of correct answers, etc. So you can create leaderboards and things like that to encourage peer interaction through that data. Now, the other way that we do it on Seneca is we provide students with access to what we call the global leaderboard. So this basically pits the students against everyone else in the world studying that course. So you'll see here, I've got a chemistry course, the leaderboard there, I'm 190,000 and something. But I can see as I answer questions, I'll see my rating go up and up. And if I stop answering questions, I'll see my rating come down. So again, it's a way to motivate students to basically to sort of compete against their peers and sort of continue their learning. And this coincidentally is also available on a class level as well, so students can see how they compare to their peers in class. But I should note, you see these are all pseudonyms here, so all Seneca students are assigned a pseudonym, so we don't ever share personal information on these leaderboards. But you can see I'm strong carbon in the middle there. On to the fourth suggestion. So the fourth suggestion looks at supporting pupils to work independently so that they so you can improve learning outcomes. Now, this is one, back to what I said earlier, obviously this is a terrible situation that we're all in. No one wants schools to close in terms of improving pupils' outcomes. However, there are some potential opportunities here. Students will have to learn a lot more effectively if they're going to learn, also a lot more independently if they're going to learn. And there are multiple reviews that identify the value in sharing strategies and supporting your students with the tools to be more independent. So, for example, some of the examples given in the report are helping pupils to reflect on their own work or consider the strategies they use if they get stuck before they get stuck, so that they have access to those strategies when they do need help. There's also a lot of evidence around metacognition and self-regulation that suggests that this is particularly an issue for disadvantaged pupils, and they're particularly likely to benefit from explicit support on working independently. So again, some very simple ways you could do this are, I'm seeing some great ideas in the chat there from people about breakout rooms and things like that. But also some other ideas that were mentioned in the review were looking at even something as simple as providing a daily checklist of tasks for students to complete, or a daily plan of things to do. I'm sure you are just as aware as I am about the lack of structure students now have in their day. So by providing that some structure around their learning, it can potentially be really beneficial at building their independence. So again, some ways that Seneca can support with this for your students. Some So these little circles that you'll see down the right-hand side of these topics here, what these allow students to do is basically see how well they've done in different topics. So if they're thinking about what they should study or what they should do next, they could look at these circles and basically work out where their areas, where the areas that they need to improve most are. And that is available to anyone. Any student can get on this and do this. Now, there are two other things that we do to try and help students be more independent. These are available with our premium accounts. So if you work in a school that has access to premium, these will be for you, just in case there's anyone on the call that is that. The first one is wrong answer mode. So this helps students, again, to focus on the areas they struggle with most by bringing all of those wrong answers into one place. And students can then just work through those systematically and see the questions that they get, that they've got wrong the most. And then the other one is called smart learning mode. And you can kind of think of that like a timetabling tool, but we basically provide students with access to, or we use students' data much more in a much deeper way. And we look at how long it's been since students have studied different topics, how well they've done in linked topics, and other bits of data that we use to basically curate an order that students should go through that's optimal for learning. So that is those two, wrong answer mode and smart learning mode. They're available if you are if you work in a premium school. Now to the fifth suggestion, and this is back to stuff that's available to anyone. Looking at different, it's important basically what the review says. It's important to note that different pupils and different styles of remote learning will link together differently, will link together in slightly different ways. So if there's different contents or different pupils that you are looking to deliver to, then you should change and adapt your approach. So there are a huge number of different ways to deliver remotely, and those were looked at within the review. And they have different strengths and weaknesses, basically, depending on the different content you're looking to deliver and the students who will be receiving that content. Now, the review says that teachers should be supported to think about how these different approaches are best suited to the content and the teaching that they're going to be doing, but also the age of their pupils as well, and being aware that different pupils will have different needs. So some examples given in the review looked at games for learning, and what those have been found to be particularly effective for vocab learning in MFL, but there's less evidence and less evidence of impact in other subjects that games are particularly beneficial for students learning. So it's important to basically make sure, depending on your context and what you're teaching and who you're teaching to, that you're adapting. And that links earlier to the point that we talked about as well, about reflecting on your practice. And that idea of high quality teaching is still high quality teaching, but making sure you're reviewing your own practice as part of that. The other thing the review says is that using technology to support retrieval practice and self-quizzing does help pupils to retain ideas and knowledge, but it's not a replacement for forms of assessment, for other forms of assessment. So again, linking that back to the way Seneca works, if we look at our courses, and thinking about retrieval practice, the review highlights that retrieval practice is a good way to help students retain information and ideas in the long term. So what we do is we provide about 80% of any topic that a student covers will be an opportunity to practice retrieving information. It'll be retrieval practice. So that will help students to retain those key ideas and knowledge that they need. But as the review says, it's not a replacement for assessment. So we do offer other courses as well. I've talked about some of them already. The standardized assessment courses that we offer are one such course, but we also offer diagnostic misconception courses that aim to diagnose misconceptions and correct them that students have. And there's also vocab courses that students can use for MFL as well. So those are all available for free for anybody. So do have a look at those if you think those would be useful. There are, of course, so those are some of our free courses that we provide. So as I say, the standard courses, the diagnostic misconception courses, the vocab, and the standardized assessment. Now, again, if you are working in a school that has access to premium, again, you will have access to a greater range of courses as well. So there's just a few up here, but there's lots and lots of courses there available for you And we recommend using a mix of all the courses that are available for you, whether you're a free or a premium user. Now, the other thing that's really important to share with you, we talked a bit about supporting parents earlier on in the session, and that was an important part of it. Seneca does help you with this through our parent accounts. So these are free to set up for parents. Parents can go and just create an account by going on our website. And then they can connect to their child in the same way that you would connect to a student. And then they can only see their child's data, but they can see the different information on the courses they've been studying, the amount of time they've spent studying, how well they've been doing, and different bits of data like that. So again, it helps to keep the parent as part of the learning process, so that they can sort of help while their child's at home with them, rather than in school, and just helps them feel more part of the process. Now, this is available and ready to use right now. So some schools use it really well. Some schools don't even know it exists. So I'm just saying that it's there if you want to use it. And we do have a number of resources that are available to help you promote this if that is useful. And what I'll do is I'll just pop them in the chat now for you. So if anyone wants any of these resources, we have SMS templates to send out to parents, email templates, little cards you can print out, how-to videos, and lots of different other resources. So if you have any if you have any use for those, please do just feel free to click on the link that I've just posted in the chat. So that is basically that in terms of what I wanted to cover in today's session. So there's just a few minutes left for questions. So I'm going to come back and have a look at the chat to see if there's any particular questions around remote learning or Seneca more generally. So I'm just seeing the first question is from Mrs. Manu, says, why NA/NS? Confused some staff. Okay, so the NA and NS, what Mrs. Banu is referring to then is the smart reassignment feature that I mentioned earlier. So that is where you set work for your students, but it's automatically done based on the topics are selected automatically based on how well your students have done in previous topics. Now, NA is when that student has some work set for them, but they haven't completed it yet. And NS just stands for not set. So if that's, say you selected that you wanted to reset the work for any students who got less than 50% as their best score, it would say NS if that student happened to get more than 50% in the previous assignment. Okay, Elizabeth says, how do I restrict parents to accessing only their child from a GDPR perspective? So the way it works, Elizabeth, is that parents create their account. When they first create their account, they have access to no resources at all, no data or anything like that. You don't need to do anything to connect their child to them. What happens is they send a text message or like a sharing link to their child, and the child has to accept the permission of the parent to see the data before that happens. So that they don't gain access to your whole class or anything like that. Okay, Alex has asked about what the main benefits of a school being premium. So what I'd suggest, Alex, is feel free to get in touch with us. I'm not going to cover that in the scope because that's slightly outside the scope of this session. But if you do have any questions about it, just feel free to drop me an email. My email is richard@seneca.io, or just reply to any of the emails you got from me in the lead up to this session. Okay, Sean asks about question-specific data rather than topic-specific data. Unfortunately, that's not something we provide at the moment. But as I say, there are tools on the student account to help students know which questions they've struggled with, using the wrong answer mode if you're at a premium school, or otherwise you can see the topic level data to get an understanding of what your students do and don't understand. The important thing to say here is that remember that when students revisit work that they've done previously, the system will know what the student does and doesn't understand as part of that, and it will adapt the content accordingly. So every session is adaptive to the individual on Seneca, so it basically happens automatically, differentiation from that. Richie asks about single sign-on. Yes, single sign-on is something we'd like to do, and we're looking to do actively soon. The same goes for MIS integration as well. Okay, so Gwerfil, I have said your name correctly. I assume you're able to link Seneca through Google Classroom. How do the MFL sound files work, please? So yes, you're able to link Seneca to Google Classroom and Microsoft Teams as well. The MFL sound files are YouTube videos, so they play automatically within the courses. Now, I'm aware that this session is meant to be half an hour, so there are quite a few questions I still haven't had the chance to answer yet. So I will just carry on going through these questions to make sure everyone who asks a question gets their question answered. But if you do need to go, I understand. But thank you very much for joining me. And if you do have any questions, just get in touch through the various channels we have, either through our live chat or via email or through our Twitter. Yeah, I'll send out this report and also a recording of this webinar if you want to share it with any of your colleagues after this session. So back to the questions. Some of my students, Sarah says, some of my students have had a problem logging into my subject, but are already able to get in via other subject areas. So when students create an account, Sarah, they just need one account to create to access any subject they want. So they don't need to be creating any more accounts. They can use just their one account. If you're having trouble, what I'd suggest you do is just get in touch with our customer support team through the chat on our website. Okay, Cheryl says, how do I change the email address when students enter incorrectly? So students need to do that on their account. You can't change that as a teacher. So Mrs. Manu says, maybe Ms. Manu suggests a tick or a cross for the content set. Some students skip over. Okay, I'm not sure I fully understand the question, Mr. Manu. I think you're saying in terms of the NA and NS for the Smart Reassign. Yeah, so so that's something we could look at. Yes, we'll look at trying to sort of clarify that. Okay, so deleting old classes. What I'm going to do is I'm going to refer you. This is a question from Joe. What I'll do is I'll refer you to. I'll just come back to a few slides. I'm going to refer you to our help section there. I'm not going to show you how this works there, but there is a video explaining how to delete old classes on our help center. If you just type in delete class, it will show you how to do that. So can you sync the data on Seneca and Google Classroom? So you can, there is an integration to share content on Google Classroom and share invite codes and things like that, but the data doesn't sync currently. Again, this is something we're looking at. Okay. Lynn says, I can't find websites as an app in Teams. Where can I get this from, please? Okay, so I think you're talking about, Lynn, there, where you try to add Seneca as a tab on Microsoft Teams, I believe. So the way that works is that you can do that just by clicking add a tab. Then there should be a website option in the apps at the top left of your apps option. If there's not, it might be something you need to speak to your IT team about because they may have blocked it. Okay, Saida says, with the reassign function, are the questions asked in a different way so students are not learning the order of answers rather than learning deeply? So yes, of course. So the way we structure our questions is there's lots of questions sort of in the background that don't necessarily get asked the first time you visit a course, and when you revisit it, it changes. But the content also changes depending on how well students did last time they studied the course. So the different ways we change questions as well. So even if it's the same question, we're able to adapt the way we do it. So it might be that we have a fill the blanks question. We are able to adapt that by changing the number of blanks, changing the position of the blank, and a number of different ways. If it's something like a multiple choice question, we can change the the order of the answers. So there's lots of different ways that lots of different sort of methods we use to make sure the learning is fresh. Be that new questions, but also changing changing around the questions that students may have already seen as they go. Okay, it's looking like I've got to the bottom of the questions there, which is great. So thank you. Last thing to say is thank you very much for joining me today. My name is Richard, as I said at the beginning, from Seneca. And if you do have any questions, just feel free to get in touch with us. We'd love to hear from you. But otherwise, thank you very much. I appreciate it's a very difficult time at the moment for teachers and parents as well. So yeah, thank you very much for all the support you're giving your students, and I hope we can help in some way through Seneca. But yeah, get in touch if you need any help. Otherwise, enjoy, and thank you very much.